Perhaps it's an opportune time to actually hand over to Andrew McPhee, both wearing the hat of a ranger and somebody who's kicked around the top end for a long time and done a lot of burning, to actually talk about his experiences with fire and particularly with wet season burning.
I've been on the park 12 years now, and I would say that in my history on the park, we started wet season burning as one of our fire management tools 10 years ago now. As initially, wet season burning began to start reducing annual speargrass fuel loads, and it started in a very small way, which was on the Southern Walk network, which is south of the Katherine River. And yeah, I wish I'd had photos back then, because I described to staff now what it was like 12 years ago. But you know, the Southern Walks is a heavily visitated area. People from all over the world in Australia come and walk it, along with the Jawoyn Trail and things like that. We, at the end of every wet season, we had to go out and open these tracks. And when I got there 12 years ago, part of opening, we had to open the vehicle track first to be able to then access the walking tracks. And we would have to put an extra screen over the front of the bull bar. So we'd have to get a ranger standing in the back of the ute. We'd push through the speargrass dragging a tractor tyre, and the person in the back of the ute would have to try and navigate us on a track that had just disappeared in speargrass. Incredible. So pretty early on, 2010 was I would say, a turning point on the park, because we're involved in the 3-park fire plot monitoring program with Darwin Centre for Bushfire Research, Andrew Edwards and Jeremy Russell-Smith and all those guys. 2010 they came to the park, and it was a good turning point where we finally got some really good scientific input into you know, all aspects of where fire management needs to change on the park. So that was the mission we've been working on the last decade. So yeah, our wet season burns have started off on very small scale, obviously in the wet. To target speargrass, you know, literally you need to, well, I call it set up areas. You have to take a risk over the previous year, set the area up, get the areas that you sort of go, right, I think we can manage burning this at a small scale during the wet. We have to hope we don't get deliberately lit fires or lightning strikes coming in and wiping out your set up areas. That happens every now and then. So you just got to live with that and move on. But if you can set an area up and then wait for that, the germination of the annual grass to come up. And for me, again, I'm not a scientist, but for me, around that 200 mil height, you can sort of get, you would safely assume that, say, 90% of regrowth has occurred. That's when we'll go through with that previous season's fuel and just, gently break up the country with mosaic burning, using that old fuel to take out the reseeding, and away we go. Acknowledging that speargrass is obviously a native species and important to Gouldian finches and all that sort of stuff. So while we're not trying to eliminate speargrass, when it's absolutely dominating an area, creating high fuel loads in the woodlands and up on the sandstone areas of the park, well, then that fire management has gone a bit astray, and we need to break that up and vary the age of that fuel. The first slide here is 17 Mile Valley, which has been a pet project of mine for a long time. And after 5 years of setting it up and keeping our fingers crossed and then getting lightning strikes in and whatever, this last January this year, we finally were able to do it as a wet season burn. I wouldn't say it was the most optimal. You can see on the photo there's some green coming through, but we had to strike when we could, and We burnt, so yeah, 17 Mile Valley, the quick history of that is it's basically spear grass and old trees. You can see in the photo there. So, you know, it's an area that we've been desperately trying to improve its health on. And we burnt probably about 40% of that from the air. That was the only, the resources we had to do because it's such a large area. And then the other half is set up to have another go this wet season, which will be interesting. This is just a shot in the evening of that burning in January, the wet season burning. So we're at the bottom end of 17 Mile Valley looking up, and very benign, very quiet burning. Nothing was intense. It was just literally just cleaning up grass at a very low intensity. This is a shot along Gorge Road inside the park. We're a couple of k's inside the park near the Gorge Ranger Station. You can see what time of year it is. You can see the clouds building up in the background, which is always good for us. Ideally, I like to, if we know that we've got rain coming, that's a good time to burn, and it'd be nice if the rain puts it out and keeps it to a small scale. You can see the old fuel there that we're targeting, and the regrowth along there. So that's just a nice clean-up sort of fire. We're trying to back down the road where you can see that car coming in the distance, left and right of the road. We're just trying to break up spear grass in the park there, because that's obviously a threat with people coming in and potentially starting a fire on us that we don't want. This is a close-up back down Gorge Road. So again, this is a classic wet season burn. We're slowly getting shrubs and things coming up through there instead of just grass and old trees, which in my book is a savanna, and we're not technically in a savanna. So this is, classic clean-up of annual grass and regrowth, and keeping the intensity down as much as we can. A nice close-up of a cool burn. So this is a good one. I like this one where you can see where the fire has been, and it's not charcoaling everything behind. So, and that's the other aim we're not doing. So that what the burned area, to me is saying, it's low intensity. It's just creeping through. A lot of the days in the wet season, it can be very still, which is good as well. So that just allows it to just trickle through and just break up that country. And this is an interesting one, because last wet season, as everyone in the top end experienced, was probably driest on record. Nitmuluk National Park was in its second year of, let's say, drought. Once we started getting rain in January, obviously we need to get into some sort of burning regime. So this is actually on the Walika Walk between Butterfly Gorge and Southern Rockhole, and on the Southern Walk networks just south of Katherine River. We did a burn that went further than what we expected, purely because of dry conditions and things like that. We're now at a point along the southern walks that it's not only spear grass. We're now varying the age of fuel there, so we're not trying to burn everything every year. We're trying to give things at least a 5-year break and just rotate burning around the place. So where Rocky's walking there, that's just a very small little walking track, and because of the low intensity nature of the burns in the sandstone, now that we've got pretty good control over the burning, you can see a tiny little thing like that he's walking on, pulled it up. You can see that on the right hand side of the path, minimal impact to shrubs and that are probably waist high and higher. So even though that was a fire that went way further than what we wanted, over the years of doing a wide burning program, from say the start of the wet right through to say into June, we've reduced the flammability in a lot of areas of the park. And when we do have a little, a wet season burn that goes a bit further than what we wanted, it doesn't take much to pull it up due to, keeping the flammability down. Okay, so here's, so this is an interesting one. So this is in the wet season, and this is around February this year. But this is a wet season burn for a totally different reason. So this is actually close to the ranger housing area and also the concession tours area. So we've got infrastructure concerns here, which then, start changing our approach. So this is a block that hadn't burnt for some time, and we realised that, to improve our fire protection of this area, we actually need to do this one a little bit hotter. So we chose to do it as a wet season burn, which then would allow that area to freshen up a bit, and regrow a bit in the for the remaining wet. But we actually wanted this one to go a little bit hotter because we need to protect housing and infrastructure. So that's where you can turn the switch a bit if you need to. Not that we do it very often, but if you need to, you can, just do a wet season burn for a different reason. And by the end of the wet season, it was freshened up. It looked green through there. People looking out the back of their houses, it didn't look bad, but they knew they were safe, and that was what we were doing with this burn. Yep, just another angle of that. So we got old grass, we got some spinifex in there, and we're literally probably 20 metres away from dwellings. So we needed to get the wind right that day and have our teams all the way around and controlling it very carefully. Just because obviously we're going to, our discussion will be also about wet season burns and other burns, but there's, obviously with a park our size, 3,000 square kilometres, we can't get to everything as a wet season burn as much as I'd like. So this is up in north of up in the Katherine River Valley. So this is looking west from the Katherine River. You can see a fair bit of speargrass down there. That's an area we'd love to get into and do some more wet season targeted stuff to reduce that flammability there. So, so what we'll do is, we'll use prevailing winds at times. We'll try and burn upwind and burn back into that to reduce the intensity. So it's using, variability in other times of the year with the resources we got at times to, do what we need to do. This is an interesting one. So November, December last year, for the first time I've been on the park, we were fighting wildfires. Never done that before because normally the wet season's started. It didn't start till the second week of January on our park. So for the first time ever, right up to Christmas, we're chasing wildfires. So this is actually north of the Katherine River in the sandstone escarpment area. And but the interesting thing with this fire is because of the burning regime over the last decade or so, what you're seeing there is not intense. It wasn't, we didn't want the fire. It was a wildfire. But because of the resilience that we've built up over time across the park, the landscape, by and large, will take that a lot better than if it was high fuel loads and annual grasses and stuff like that. So the speargrass dominance of both sides of the escarpment, both sides of the Katherine River now in the sandstone area is not like it was a long time ago. So the fires are low intensity, trickling around, and eventually we let them go north into fire scars that we'd done previously, and the fire put itself out with a little bit of work along the edge. Yeah, so that's just another view of that fire. So trickling around, low intensity. The conditions were as worse as they could be, like we were over 40 degrees every day. At that time, Katherine broke the record for, I think it was over 55 days in a row of over 40, and we're out there. That was happening at that time. This is my favourite photo from about 5 years ago, I think. So in the southeast of the park, we've had a project to protect the southeast section portion of Nitmuluk National Park from the traditional fires that come in from the southeast. those fires used to rip through these lancewood forests that are very prevalent in the southeast and would come all the way to the Southern Walking Network and almost to our office door many, many years ago. We started probably in 2009, we started going out there and just doing small-scale burning. Initially, it was just off vehicle tracks, and now we do what we call our annual fire camp, where we go out and crisscross the country with just dropping matches, low-scale stuff, coming into lancewood pockets and burning out from them, depending on the wind at the time. We did this year in, year out until 5 years into the project. We came to this lancewood pocket and we were having a rest because it was on top of a hill, and we were stopping, having a drink and a quick feed. And then we looked around, and in one of the most degraded looking lancewood pockets that was around, where you've got a lot of this grass coming into the forest, which you don't get in a healthy forest. So you've got all those, wicks where fire can get in easily and just smash lancewood, which is, fire sensitive. We were getting regrowth, and that was really cool to see after 5 years of being out there, essentially initially protecting visitors, and the spin-off was we started getting lancewood regrowth, and ever since then, more and more lancewood is being observed as coming, as regenerating, and it's really good to see. Yeah, so that's just a quick run through of my slides. Anything else you needed from me, Dave?
No, that's fantastic, Andrew, and great to see some lancewood regeneration there.
Yeah, definitely.
Must be very pleasing to see the product of your labours, basically.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it is. Yes, definitely.
One question, actually, you did sort of partly answer as you were going through your presentation. I was actually wondering about: do you actually ever get high intensity fires in the wet? I mean, obviously in the dry season, it's quite common that we see taken right out. Have you had that experience of losing the whole canopy in the wet season?
No, not with anything we've done. So I think I was trying to say in those slides with the ones that looked quite intense, was that in that particular block, and we're only talking 5 acres, we were deliberately wanting to clean up that block. So we picked it on a day that we had a wind behind us, and we needed to take that out for infrastructure. There was a definite need to do that. So that's why I put those ones in, because wet season, like any burning that you do, there's variables there for you to wind it up if you want to, or if you need to, and dial it right back, and for me, some of the pictures there told the story of the most ideal, and that was just some that, if you've got this small area that you need to clean up and clean it up quickly, you can dial it up if you need to, but it's not something we do very often. So canopy, no. All our wet season stuff is, and that's part of leaving, say, annual grass to grow, say, around that 200 mil plus height, is that the more green you've got, the more of a break, a foot brake. It's like putting the brake on, the pedal down and slowing that spread of fire. If I left the, say, spear grass grow to 6 foot high and green, I've lost the window. I could be there forever trying to, get patchy burns in, but we wait for around that 200 mil high. So it actually, in the ideal world, that will actually restrict the movement of fire. You'll hear a lot more crackling, you'll get a lot of white smoke, things like that, and it just restricts that hot movement across there. I've never seen a wet season burn that we've done that's gone into the canopy, and I must admit that we don't get a lot of early dry burns anymore going into the canopy as we've thinned out the spear grass across the park. I was just going to say that, for us, I think I said before, wet season burning is just one of our tools. It's not the only tool we use, but certainly varying the age of fuel, even in one season, like you can actually, instead of saying we've burnt the same time every year, which does create its own issues and monocultures and things like that. Varying our fire season as wide as we can do it from, when we feel we can start doing wet season burning, which could be November, could be December, January, just depends on how big the wet is. And we'll take that right through to July, which by then you're doing your dry season burns, which are going to be from helicopter and things like that. But yeah, having that wider age creates, your checkerboard effect, your chess game, whatever you want to call it, and gives you either or options, when the wildfire season comes in, where you don't have a lot of control. You're not controlling the ignition or anything like that. So, wet, as you said, Dave, wet season burning is a bit more labour intensive, and it's something that you do over time. It's not like you go out one afternoon and do your wet season burning. It just doesn't work like that. You're targeting small areas. You're targeting areas that you can get to. My example of the Southern Walk Network, Nitmuluk National Park, from Dunlop Swamp, for those that know it, which is about 2/3 of the way out back to the east on that walking trail network. We couldn't get to that for years because it's a swamp and we couldn't cross it. We couldn't get over the other side. So for years we had this ocean of speargrass within sight, over the other side of the swamp that we couldn't get to and had to leave it. The weird thing that, the change that allowed us to get over there and start breaking up that country and reducing the dominance and the excessive speargrass fuel loads from there right out to 8th Gorge was climate change. As wet seasons dropped off, it gave us access to get out there and do things. So that was very interesting, because for the the first, say, half or 5, 6, 7 years of my time on the park, it was just this goal that we could never get to. We could get closer back to our office, and out to Dunlop Swamp. We could drive out there in a Polaris or a 4-wheel drive at certain times and then go for walks and just do your small break-up burns, over the wet. But yeah, it took climate change, I reckon, to allow us to expand that program, and it's preventing wildfires smashing that area now. So the slides I showed before, wildfires in the park, while we'll still get them, while we'll still get lightning strikes, deliberately lit fires, things like that sneaking in, they're not devastating anymore, thank God. Like, we've actually found the park is much more diversity, much more layering of regrowth instead of just grass and old trees. We've got multiple layers in between. And what we're finding now, especially with our prescribed burns, the more aerial, early dry season type burns, is the park's actually harder to burn now as a result, because it's been broken up that much. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. So.